let's now create a script. The second icon on the jump toolbar looks like a tuna can opener or sardine can opener. Brings up an empty script window. Okay, so this is our start point. Now, the first thing I want to do is, and it'll be useful for me just to have a data. I just want to remind you what the Oneway advisor looks like. Okay, so this is what the Oneway advisor looks like. Let's just keep it there. So, what we have, we're going to, in this stage of the course, just create the skeleton structure for this window. So the first thing is, this is a window that we can create, and there is a function in jump, and it is called new window. So new window, I can open brackets, and when I open a bracket, jump automatically puts a close bracket in, and also change the name to blue, indicating that jump recognizes this as the name of a function. So there's a function called new window, which, surprise, surprise, creates a new window. Jump doesn't really care about spaces, and if you are familiar with programming, the notion of having spaces in function names will be quite stressful potentially. You should decide whether or not you want to use spaces. I'm not going to use spaces in my code, so I'm just going to say new window. Now the window has a title, and you can see the title of this is Oneway advisor. So I'm going to open double quote and type Oneway advisor, close quote. That is the first argument of the new window function. We can then provide a number of additional arguments, and arguments are separated by commas. So I like to now put some line breaks, so just press enter a few times, and that's some space where the content of the window is going to go. So, but let me show you what we can do with this. If you're following along, I don't want you to follow with this. Let me just show you. I could put in something called a text box. Hello. If I can type. Hello world. And if I run this now, just click on the play button, then it creates a window here. It's created a window, Oneway advisor, with the text hello world in. Okay, so I don't want to have hello world. Well, first of all, if I just run this again, if I show you that this window, you see the window is very small. It's actually quite difficult to grab hold of. And there's no margin or anything. The text is right at the very edge. So one of the first things I like to do is make sure any content I have is contained inside a border. And Jump has something called a border box. And with this I can specify the border at the top, the border at the bottom, and at the left and right. And that's 20, like so. So it's border box, top, bottom, left, right. Those can be in any order, and the numbers are the number of pixels that's going to be on the corresponding side. So I've got make sure you keep track of commas. Commas separate the different arguments within the new window function. So I've got a new window, and the first argument is the advisor, and the second argument is the whole of this thing, and this thing is known as a display box. So basically a new window comprises a collection of display boxes. Those are the graphical user elements that comprise the window. They're either things that you can see, like buttons and text and drop-down lists, or they are display boxes that control layout, and border box is one of the ones that controls layout. So now I could have had, if I put my text box back in, hello world, you'll see now it gets displayed with a border. Just bring that over. The window's actually getting displayed about that side. It's still hard for me to grab, it's still a small window, but you can see now it's got a border around the actual window itself. Okay, so I don't want it to say hello world, I want it to say text box, sorry, I want it to say assumption checker, and actually you notice this assumption checker is within this tabbed region. So I have a tab, kind of strange really, because I only have a single tab. So maybe the reason for this is I've got a more advanced version of the Oneway Advisor where there's more than one tab. Since what we're going to build only has one tab, I don't really need a tab. So I'm just going to now change the text to say assumption checker. Okay, so if I run this, now what happens here is I've got an error. Perhaps there's a missing comma or bracket. You're going to get this type of error quite a lot when you're working with display boxes. So I've either got a missing bracket or quote. You see here I haven't got the open quote in the text box, in the actual text. So let me just put the quote there. And notice that if I've got quoted text, it appears in this kind of magenta color. And I had that missing quote, and you see the color was wrong, it was in black. So quoted text should be in magenta. So hopefully that now runs, and as always the window doesn't appear in the recording. Here you go. So now I've got that assumption checker. Now I also want that to be in bold. So this is a text box, and a text box displays text, but it can also contain additional arguments. So those are separated with commas. And if you start using jump after a while, you get to know these, but you're not expected to remember these. So one of the things we'll do in the course is figure out how we learn how to work with these different display boxes. And we do that by using the script and index under help. So the script and index is organized by different types of classification. Now we're working with display boxes, and you see a whole list of different types of display box. So for example, there are display boxes to show radio buttons. There are display boxes to show checkboxes, for example. And what we're working with is a text box. So when I select text box, it gives me an example here. Text box, the first argument is the text. I can also indicate whether the text is justified and whether I want to set wrapping. But there's other things that we can do which are listed here, and we have so-called messages that we can send to the text box. And I can change we can get things, and if we can get them, we can also set them. So I can set the font size, I can set the font style. So set font style, here's an example, set font style italic. Well, what I want to do is set the font style to be bold. The way I'm going to do this is to send a message, and this notation says send a message to this object. So set font style, and the font style is going to be bold. Now be careful, this closing bracket is closing the sent font style. I have to make sure I don't lose the closing bracket for the text box. Conveniently, jump helps me. It shows me this is the closing bracket, it highlights the opening bracket. So this bracket corresponds to the text box. If I put the cursor here, this bracket corresponds to the border box. and this bracket corresponds to the new window. So I can easily sort of check that my open and close brackets match each other. So what do I have? I have a new window, and the new window contains a border, and the border contains text. Now, to indicate that one thing is contained in another thing, I've tabbed. So this text box, I've pressed the tab key to indent it so I can see that it's contained within the border box. This is a good discipline to help us make sure we keep track of the structure of the window. Now if I run this, the text appears nice solid font. So assumption checker. Now what I want is to have all of these text boxes for all the words. So that's just going to be a tedious piece of typing. Let's think about this though. I'm going to have some text here, and then this is a button. So I've got text followed by a button, and then another line, text followed by a button, and that's repeated 4 times. What I want to do is make sure that these buttons all line up with each other, which may not be the case if these are all different lengths text. So one nice facility Jump has is something called a line-up box. So this is a display box which formats the layout of content, and the first thing is I have to say how many columns are going to be lined up. I've got 2 columns being lined up, and now I'm going to press enter. A bit like border box, I've just got this formatting information followed by the actual content. So this is formatting and then the contents. So now I'm going to specify a text box to create this, and then a button box to create this. And let me just show you how this works. Line 1. I'll just call that button A. Now let me just create a second line. If I just copy these and then paste, that's line 2, and that's B. So what I've got is a text box, and then a button box, a text box, and a button box. If I only had this content, then what would happen is you'd get text, and then the next line you'd get a button box, then text, and then a button box, and so forth. In fact, I may not even get that, because the border box only expects one piece of content, and the one piece of content is this text. So this probably won't even work if I run this. I actually get something which is a bit chaotic. It's not rendering correctly. So this border box can only have one piece of content, and that single piece of content has a border around it. So I need to basically say all of these things are contained within a single entity, and that's going to be a VList box. Now get rid of that closed bracket, indent those, and then put the closed bracket there. I'll let you do a pause and a rewind on the video to take a look at that, but basically I'm saying my border box can only have one piece of content, and the content I'm going to use is what's called a VList box. A VList box is a very generic piece of content which says I can have multiple things and they're ordered one on top of the other. So this is the first line, and then this is the second line, but then this is also organizing things. So now when I run this, I get the effect that I want. If I can just run it so the window appears close to the video recording. I'll run it once more, trying to just run this so that, here's the window. Just want to get the window appearing. Yeah, here we go, that's good enough. Grab you. So I've got the assumption checker, line 1A, line 2B. Okay, So let's put some real text in here. Instead of line 1, and instead of AB, I'm just going to put an X for now. And for the second line, residuals are normally distributed, and that can also be an X. These X's are going to be replaced with the icons later on. So now I have a window that looks like this. I would like to do a couple of things. First of all, I don't want this text going quite so long. I'd like this first line here and the second line to be kind of roughly equal length. So I can change the wrapping on here. And you just have to get to know the sort of numbers. If I put about 240, I think. You just try a number and see if that works. So that's kind of better. I've got the less width to that line before it wraps onto the second line. I'd also like more spacing between these items, and the line up box, I can also specify some spacing. So that's looking a bit nicer. I think if I want to be compatible with the example I'm showing you, I probably have even bigger spacing, something like this. Okay, so those are my first two lines, and I think actually it's quite dramatic, the effect that just putting some spacing in and controlling the wrapping in terms of the visual appearance. It's starting to look much more professional, much closer to the final outcome now. And all I really need, we're going to be looking at a separate lesson how to put the icons on, but I want to have the next two rows, and that's literally just repeating. I'm taking this. I need to make sure I've got a comma here to separate these different items. Oops. And then one more. So this is the third line. It's going to read and get the spelling right helps. Last but not least, okay, so that is my window. Again, notice it's gone wider, so these last two I should just include the same commands to wrap those text boxes. There we go. So that's good. That is the structure of my window. It says the assumption checker. I've got the assumptions that are being checked, and then I've got these buttons which are going to be placeholders for the icons, which will be dealt with separately. So that's good progress. I want to save this. Click on save. Save this to scripts, and I'm just going to call this step 1. Okay. So that's what I wanted to achieve in this first lesson. But I realized that maybe I covered quite a lot in terms of these display boxes. Let me just explain a couple of principles here, just with a little demonstration by creating a new window again. Now, I would encourage you, as you're learning to scripting, to create these little test windows and just see how things work. I'm just going to show you the principle of V-list boxes and H-list boxes. So if I have a V-list box, and let's put in line 1, there we go, so 3 lines. I run this, then the 3 lines just appear one on top of the other. The first thing I always do is put a border box in. I really don't like things being on the edge like so. Make sure you indent things. This is cosmetic, but if you don't, you're going to really lose track of where you are. Jump helps by putting these little vertical lines to help you visually see where things line up with each other. So again, just run this. So now I have my window, and I've got the border at the left and at the top. If I had a H-list box, then the content appears like so: line 1, line 2, line 3. So by having a combination of, doesn't make sense to call them line now, but if I just call this A, B, C, actually let me put some space in there. And I could then maybe have a V-list box that contains ABC, and I can have a second V-list box which contains D, E, and F. So what do I have here? Let's just make that a bit tidier. I've got ABC, which are vertically aligned, and DEF, which are vertically aligned. But these two vertical alignments are horizontally aligned. So the result is that I end up with this layout. ABC vertically aligned, DEF vertically aligned, but these two vertical boxes are horizontally aligned. Or alternatively, these could have been horizontal. And this could be vertical. So the point I'm trying to make here is by using combinations of vertical list boxes and horizontal list boxes, we can create some type of grid format, which is typically all we need to control layout. In addition to V-list box and H-list box, I can use a border box to make sure I've got nice sized margins around the content. And if I have the case where I'm trying to line up columns of information, then the line up box ensures the columns have equal width. Okay, so that completes this lesson.